Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's 60-minute presentation as part of the webinar series of Wednesday Rainmaking by the Women Rainmakers of the American Bar Association Law Practice Division. To start today's program, I would like to introduce the chair of the webinar committee for the Women Rainmakers, Carol M. Bass. Carol joins us today from New York City, where she is partner in the Trust and Estates Practice Group at Moses and Singer. Thank you all for joining us. We'll now begin the webinar.
Thank you, Sasha, and thank you to all the Rainmakers around the country who have chosen to learn more about leadership from our panel of successful women Rainmakers. The mission of the ABA Women Rainmakers is to educate professional women about marketing and business development, to provide mentoring opportunities for our members, and to provide networking opportunities to build personal and professional relationships. You can find up-to-date information regarding our initiatives and programming by visiting the ABA Women Rainmakers homepage. We hope you'll save the dates for our next webinars, our remaining webinars for 2021 on September 22nd and December 8th. Today, we are fortunate to have a wonderful panel who, together with our moderator, will provide valuable insights on leadership development strategies. Today's speakers are Tristan L. Duncan, Elisa J. Gray, and the Honorable Maureen Mulligan, and our moderator today is Michele Powers. Tristan L. Duncan is a partner and the co-chair of the Class Action and Appellate Litigation Practice Group at Shook, Hardy & Bacon in Kansas City, Missouri. Tristan focuses her practice in constitutional, class action, and energy law. In that capacity, she prosecutes and defends challenges to state and federal legislation, leading the firm's constitutional law efforts and the firm's comprehensive national and international energy-related litigation in product liability, environmental, and toxic tort, antitrust, consumer fraud, and commercial disputes. She also has significant experience handling federal and state governmental investigations and administrative proceedings. In 2013, the Association of Corporate Counsel recognized Tristan as a value champion for her innovative, collaborative, and savings-driven approach in nationwide litigation. This defense work also garnered praise from the National Law Journal, which named her one of the nation's top 50 energy and environmental trailblazers in 2015, and Missouri Lawyers Media, which honored her as a 2013 legal champion. Elisa J. Gray is a partner with Tiffany & Bosco, PA in Phoenix, Arizona. She focuses her practice in the areas of probate-related litigation, administration, and mediation, representing corporate trustees, professional fiduciaries, and individuals in such matters as complicated or contested guardianships, conservatorships, estates, and trusts. In addition, Elisa is a certified yoga instructor and teaches regularly at Desert Song Healing Arts Center. She frequently offers her yoga instruction and insights to lawyers, judges, and other professionals in the legal world. Since 2011, Elisa has been on the advisory board for Warrior One and is one of the lead teachers for Warrior One's Mindfulness in Law teacher training. Among other awards, in 2015, Elisa was selected as one of the most influential women in Arizona business, as published in Arizona Business Magazine. The Honorable Maureen Mulligan is an Associate Justice of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Superior Court in Boston, Massachusetts. Prior to her appointment to the bench, Judge Mulligan was a partner at the law firm of Peabody & Arnold, with broad experience as a trial lawyer, representing clients in complex business disputes, professional liability claims, and insurance coverage matters. She represented clients in a wide range of industries, including financial, technology, digital media, power generation, and insurance. Over the course of her career, Judge Mulligan has served in leadership roles with the American Bar Association, Boston Bar Association, and the Women's Bar Association. She currently serves as chair of the ABA Commission on Women in the Profession, and throughout her career has advocated for the advancement of women in the profession of law. Judge Mulligan remains actively involved in the tort, trial, and insurance practice section of the ABA and was one of the founding members of the Women Trial Lawyers Committee. Last, but certainly not least, is our moderator today, Michele Powers. Michele is the founder of Elite Lawyer Coaching, focusing on lawyers' individual leadership excellence, high-value systematic teams, and organizational cultural shifts within law firms and legal departments. Michele is a former big law partner with extensive experience handling complex litigation, all forms of dispute resolution and trials. She was named one of the top 75 women litigators in California by the California Daily Journal in 2004 and received the Excellence in Leadership Award from the American Bar Association, Tort, Trial, and Insurance Practice Section in 2012. Michele is a certified coach and member of the International Coaching Federation and is a certified systematic team coach foundational level through the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're excited to learn more about owning our power as women, expert leadership development strategies and tips. And now I'm going to turn it over to Michele.
Thank you so much, Carol, and welcome everybody to our panel. I'm going to dive right in because we have a lot to cover in the next 55 or so minutes. We've broken this down essentially into three areas. First, we're going to be discussing defining the power, what power and leadership look like and what those mean within our cultural context. Next, we'll look at the systemic challenges women lawyers face in owning our power and rising to leadership. And then finally, we'll be addressing the importance of building relationships and supportive networks, allyship within the profession. So this morning, as I was waking up and looking at my LinkedIn feed, this is what came across. And I had to include it because it is exactly what we're talking about here. Jacinda Ardern is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. And I completely agree with the commentator at the top that this is what the future of leadership looks like. But here what she's talking about in this tweet is really the fact that she's being somehow, she's being criticized for not being aggressive or assertive enough because somehow she's seen as being weak because she's empathetic. And the idea that you cannot be a leader who's both compassionate and strong is false. But what we're looking at in defining power and in looking at what leadership looks like is that there is really a paradigm shift in the power structure and in what people are understanding good leadership looks like. And in looking at it in just in a very high level aspect, it's important, I think, to put it into historical perspective. I have a sociology background. My undergraduate degree is in sociology and anthropology. And so I look at things through systemic frameworks. And in The Art of War, which Sun Tzu wrote, he was a Chinese general about a millennium ago, that he wrote this seminal work that is widely read today. I have my own copy and have had for probably a decade or two. When he talks about, he uses the words war and leadership interchangeably, and fear and deception are some of the most frequent words used in that work. And then when we shift to in 1532, Machiavelli published The Prince, which again is the seminal work that really is known as Machiavelli was famous for saying the ends justify the means and champion relationships that were really about power over others and utilizing others in order to further oneself, really looking out for number one. And these are really what would be considered, more of the old paradigm of power, that authority to exercise one's will over others, which is the definition of power that Max Weber codified. He was a German sociologist back in 1922. And what you'll notice is that in looking at this shift in power and how we define it and how we understand it should be exhibited through leadership, it is really shifting. The next two definitions that you see here are, I got off the internet within the last week, and especially the one at dictionary.com, it doesn't even address anything about having power over someone. It is about the capacity or ability to accomplish something. So you can really see that there's a shift going on in the definition of power. And what here, in looking at these shifting power principles, what what I understand it is that the old story of power, there's so much importance in this. We're not talking about that you throw out one over the other. There are many times when you need a hierarchy, when it's important to be able to interrupt someone and to proceed with whatever it is that you need to do as a leader, and to have your instructions followed. So, but in the new power paradigm that really emphasizes the new model of leadership that is more collaborative and inclusive, it really allows for a leadership style that creates teams and organizations that are more agile, they're more collaborative, they are more creative, they're able to adapt to this increased speed of change that is really what we're experiencing as a society and a culture. So in looking at, when you think about how you step into your role, how you own your power, how you want to be a leader, it's important to understand, to look at the different paradigms and sort of the conflicts that may be present for you to really rise into your power. And with that, I want to turn to our panelists, and I'm going to see about sharing this screen for a moment. Hopefully this will work. And turning to you, Judge Mulligan, what are your thoughts on the definition of power and leadership? And sort of how do you define these, and what do they mean to you?
So, I mean, when I think about power, I don't think of exerting power over others. What I think about is finding our own voice and developing a plan to reach your own goals, recognizing your own leadership skills. I mean, I hope, a very collaborative way of leading in the roles that in the volunteer roles or in my past work in a firm. And I firmly believe that that serves the practice of law the best. Because as individuals, we contribute sort of in a singular lane, but as we sort of define our own power and bring other people into the circle as we try to advance our own career, I think the collaborative is much better than the individual. So the whole brings much more to the profession, and frankly, to each person's practice.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I think I completely agree with you as far as for the collaborative principles. Elisa, what is your take on power and leadership?
Well, first, Michele and the ABA, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this today. It's really exciting. I've been thinking a lot about this term power, and I love the quote from the New Zealand Prime Minister, because I do think this is something that women grapple with, being seen as too assertive or not assertive or enough, being questioned about how we approach things. To me, I think power predominantly rests in two components, wisdom and compassion. And if we marry those two concepts together, I think that the power, it might be a quieter power, but I think it's a more sustainable power. I don't think that power necessarily has to be overt brute force to have true power. And I think about people who have had a lasting impression in our world, or just in this country. For some reason, Eleanor Roosevelt came to my mind. She was very powerful, but it was a quiet, steady power. And that's sort of the power or the wisdom that I try to move from.
Oh, I like that. I like bringing in the wisdom and the fact that you don't have to be strong and loud in order to be strong, right?
Right.
Tristan, what is your take on power, and how do you view your leadership? And be sure to unmute. I see you're muted.
So in our discussions preparing for this presentation today, it allowed me to reflect on all these different concepts of power. And I think the one that resonated the most with me is, I think it came out of one of the dictionary definitions, which was the power to change things and the ability to influence others. And when you talk about how has that, in my own personal experience, evolved over time, I think back to the first time as a young associate, I tried to have some influence, and I was proposing at a partner meeting a new way of alternative billing arrangements and an alternative ways to pay associates, and that we were all working too hard and we needed to be paid more. And the whole thing went over like a lead balloon, and it was an utter failure. And I had no influence. I felt completely powerless. And it became ridiculed. It became known as the Duncan Manifesto because it was tabbed, I planned to just work less and get paid more. But what I did learn about it over time is that it has a ripple effect. And I'm really excited to see these young women who are associates in our firm now, who are very bold and speak up, and their ideas are received much more enthusiastically than they were at one time. And I think it's in large part due to this new power paradigm that you just outlined for us all, Michele, which is more collaborative, inclusive, and idea driven. And our current managing partner, Madeline McDonough, is our first woman managing partner, and she exemplifies all those kinds of attributes. When you're excited about an idea, she's the first person you want to tell.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I love the idea of the ripple effect because that's true. It's like being able to stand up and move the ball forward for everyone, even through what might have been a fantastic failure. And thank you for sharing that with us because that is a part of being vulnerable, which is a key component of the new leadership style. So in turning now, Judge Mulligan, I'm wondering if you have an example or ideas of how you stepped into leadership and owned your power in your career, if something that might be helpful for us in understanding this discussion.
I think for me, one of the most helpful things in terms of stepping into roles of leadership was having a very wide network of professional friends because I felt incredibly supported and encouraged by both the men and women who were part of my professional environment and gave me support for moving forward or taking on leadership roles in volunteer activities, taking on leadership roles in firms, and moving me forward in my career and helping me understand that I did have the skills and I needed to own that in order to create my own strategic plan to move forward. And so I guess the point I would make is it's important to not just sit in your office or be extremely isolated and think that just working hard is going to change your environment or change your opportunities in the profession. In order to create opportunities to step into, we all need to get out and meet people and talk to people, get ideas other than our own, expand our own horizons. And so I would say, being mentored, being sponsored, but also being a mentor and learning from not just people who are more experienced than me, but also people who are younger and less experienced than me coming up in the ranks.
Yeah, I completely agree. Getting out and really creating those connections helps elevate your leadership and your opportunities. Tristan, what would you say as far as for experiences with your own leadership journey?
Well, so I think I originally believed that great ideas would carry the day, that as long as you stood and delivered a good idea, it would be persuasive, and that's all you need. And so this is where I agree with Judge Mulligan. My experience has taught me that's not true. It takes a lot of nurturing and consensus building behind the scenes. And as Judge Mulligan just mentioned, if you aren't yourself in a position of being influential, it's important to reach out to those who are currently influential. Hopefully you can persuade them of their ideas and they band together with you. So one example for me in my personal experience was I had a case and an argument before the Kansas Supreme Court, and I was trying to make a novel argument. And I quoted some of Kurt Vonnegut in the brief. And then the Lawrence Journal World did a front page story on it and had gotten a quote from Vonnegut that I misunderstood and misinterpreted Vonnegut. So of course I was horrified, and I found my way of reaching out to Vonnegut and said, excuse me, I think I have correctly interpreted your story, but if you disagree, I challenge you, I tried to do it as politely as possible, to a public debate over the true meaning of your short story, and it will be great fun for all of us. Well, thankfully he did reach out and he said, I believe you did quote me correctly. What can I do to help? And he and I became, somewhat friends later, but the point is, he did write a letter to the editor, and it did become a good alliance down the road. So that's just a little anecdote for, you can't do it all on your own.
Well, that's fantastic. I love that story. Kurt Vonnegut has been one of my favorite authors for a while. That's fantastic. Alisa, how would you what kind of stories do you have as far as for examples of you stepping into your leadership and power throughout your career?
Yeah, I think one thing that in hindsight, I feel like I'm sort of the accidental leader. It's not like I went to law school sort of later, started practicing at the age of 32, didn't really feel like I knew what to do. I didn't have any idea about how to build a practice. I was just sort of going to law school and then getting a job. And I didn't really think I want to become a leader. But in hindsight, 30 years hence, I think that you have to be looking at the long game. This is not something that happens overnight. And it's about saying yes to opportunities. Somebody suggested that I join a section, or actually be on the council of the mental health elder law section at the state bar. And I thought, what's a section? I didn't even know, and I said, sure. And so I got on the section and I did a good job, and I got known for being reliable, and I would do the work. And then I got asked to be on another section, and then I got asked to be on the CLE committee, and just things like that started happening. It wasn't that I thought, oh, I want to be known in 25 years as a leader. And I'm kind of a social person, so I like that aspect. Then when I started practicing yoga very seriously and really learning about how that really helped me in my law practice, I approached the bar about presenting a program for stress management for attorneys based upon yoga and understanding the physiological effects of stress on the body and so forth. And because I had built this foundation at the bar, they gave me free rein to put on a program. And that was in 2006. And I had no idea where that was going. It was somewhat of a lark. And, now I feel like we're on this crest of this movement where mindfulness, now there are mindfulness classes in law schools. They didn't have a mindfulness class when I went to law school, or I missed the memo. It was very much more this authoritarian, top down, let's make you feel stupid kind of environment that I didn't really understand. Why is that a pedagogically sound approach? So I think that for me, it's play the long game and then be your authentic self. Because when I tried to bifurcate my yoga side from my litigator side and have this dual approach, I felt very inauthentic. And as soon as I allowed myself to combine those two parts of my life, things started to really flow. And I felt more grounded and more able to speak my truth. And so that's kind of how I did it.
Thank you. I love that, the accidental leader and concept, which I think we can all relate to, and as well as the fact that getting into your authenticity, right, and being authentic to who you are is really important in creating your own leadership style, as well as owning your power. If people can definitely sense the fact that if you're not being authentic, it's not going to work as well. So in switching here into the systemic cultural challenges for women owning their power, I came across this this cartoon, which I really think is pretty spot on. This is actually was published in 1988 by a cartoonist named Rihanna Duncan. And it helps exemplify what we're talking about here, where just because of perceived gender roles, things that are part of the collective unconscious that Carl Jung talked about, they are in our unconscious, and we grew up with them, this idea of perhaps women's voices not carrying the authority or actually being heard in a group context. Interestingly, there was recently a marketing survey done. They were looking to try to see how to produce advertising that would get people to go out and get vaccinated by the COVID-19 vaccination, right? And in doing that, they were curious, well, should we use a male voice or should we use a female voice? And they took a script, and they had a male voice reading the script and a female voice reading the script. And hands down, and by quite a few percentage points, the male voice was found by the majority of participants to be much more trustworthy, much more credible. It was someone that they would listen to, and the woman's voice was not. And in that, you're really running into this idea of, what are the gender role constructs that are part of what we're dealing with as leaders, and stepping into our power. I'm offering this here. These masculine traits and feminine traits, first off, understand that everybody exhibits both. Of course, men can be compassionate and cheerful, just like women are aggressive and decisive, right? These are taken from the Burns Sex Role Inventory, which is a standard test for assessing perspectives on gender roles. It's statistically valid and it's highly replicable. And I only offer it here as a way of sort of opening up your mind to how you're perceived, what are seen as masculine or feminine. The masculine traits, especially leadership abilities, if you're a man, you tend to be presumed to have these, and it's good for you to have these. Whereas if you're a woman, you're going to run into a little more prove it again, needing to prove it, not having a presumption of excellence, and etc. So I think it just helps to understand why we can end up in one of the, as women, this tightrope double bind that I like to talk about, and that is brought up quite a bit, where if you're too aggressive or too assertive, you can be told, hey, you're too much, tap it down, not liked. Maybe you're even, given that moniker of, man, she's just a bitch, right? And hopefully that's okay to say on for the ABA. Anyway, but it's true. You have that. Whereas then if you're nice, if you're liked, and you're exhibiting more of the feminine characteristics, then maybe many times if you're just putting your head down and working and thinking that you're going to be recognized, the fact is that you won't be, because people say, yes, she's a great worker bee, but she doesn't show leadership capabilities because she's not bringing in these other male gendered attributes. And I do think it's important to acknowledge that if you are a woman of color, or if you are an LGBTQ person, or a non-binary person, you're going to be ending up with even more of these restrictions on how you're perceived. And that's really important to acknowledge and to understand when you're thinking about how you want to show up and develop your career. Now, in turning back to the panelists, with that in mind, Elisa, I'd like to start with you. Given the systemic and cultural challenges faced by women, in your experience, how do women step into their power and own it?
Well, I guess I would echo some of the things I said before. You have to really know who you are and feel, have a good sense of self-awareness. It's also, if you're in a legal, like a litigation matter or a transactional matter or in a committee, always be prepared. And I think what I've seen is women tend to over-prepare actually, but I've never felt bad about being prepared and knowing my case, knowing what my report, the content of my report and so forth. So it sometimes I think, you just have to acknowledge that this is going to be a challenge. I'm a 6'3", I wish. I'm a 5'3", woman. And sometimes people will underestimate me because I present somewhat diminutive. I don't feel diminutive, I feel powerful, but I think people mistake that. And so when I come out and I know my stuff, I know what I have to say, especially if I don't get to, I hate to use this term because it's a loaded term, but I'm going to say it anyway, strident, okay? When I can speak more from my belly and not from up here, when I can speak from my heart, I find it carries better. The other thing that I really am trying to practice every day is the power in the pause. And I don't mean like kitten pause, although there's a lot of power in kitten pause. I mean the power of pausing and reflecting. We have a right to pause and reflect. I think there's a tendency to rush into the silences to show we know something. And what I've learned, and I've learned this actually from a lot of my male mentors, was how they could command the room or the situation by taking a pause. And I'm talking about 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Doesn't have to be a long pause. But when you can feel confident enough to pause, and sometimes to even say, you know what? I need to think about that for a second. Let me get back to you, okay? Because I think at least I always had this tendency to feel that I have to respond right away. I have to show that I'm really smart, that I'm good on my feet. And now I feel like I can say, wow, that's really interesting. I'm going to think about that for a minute. And this is something that also comes in through the yoga, and I just have to look at everything through that lens. There's this principle of discernment. And discernment is that ability to take a look and see what is the appropriate response for this situation, whether I'm dealing with my children, my partner, opposing counsel. Just, not everything is a nail, therefore I don't need to bring a hammer to every encounter. So by taking that pause, I can reflect even for just a second or two and decide, how do I want to move this forward? Do I need to let off with a big old can of, sometimes I do, I can do that. But most of the time I find that if I can pause and reflect, I'm more effective. I'm more effective for my clients. I'm more effective for the situation. And I feel better about myself at the end of that encounter. So I've been really working on the power in the pause. And that's how I feel I'm best able to handle some of these challenges.
Well, that's fantastic. The power of the pause is really a useful tool. And I will say, Elisa, you show up like you're 6'3". I mean, which is great. It's like power in small packages.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So Tristan, turning to you, what would you say as far as for the, addressing these systemic and cultural challenges faced by women? How do you see that and stepping into a leadership?
So, as you know, when I first saw them, I kind of recoiled, thinking, that that they didn't exemplify me or many people I knew. It seemed too binary in terms of characterizing men a certain way versus women a certain way. And so I guess my message would be, don't let statistics debilitate you. I mean, when you read the statistics, I think it's human nature to immediately think, well, maybe I shouldn't ask, maybe I shouldn't seek a promotion because I'm a woman, and therefore I necessarily am going to be perceived in this sort of weaker and less effective way. And I think that's bad. I think as Judge Mulligan, and I think even Elisa has said throughout these comments, I think the best advice for owning and stepping into power is to ask. And I think both when I was coming up the ranks and now that I am in a position of managing others, many times you don't know an associate or even another partner wants a certain opportunity, and we're all going 90 miles an hour, and maybe we ought to be better at identifying those who need to be promoted, etc. But the reality is many times we don't know. So I think people who raise their hand and make the ask have a better chance of succeeding, if not in the immediate request. That person stays in your mind and you start looking for opportunities for that person. So don't be discouraged if you get turned down the first time either. I also think, as Elisa just mentioned, some of my best mentors and allies have been men. And when I've seen even my opponents across the table from me take an approach that I thought was very effective, I've tried to imitate that. So I think you can learn as much from your opponents as you can from your colleagues and mentors.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a lot to be said about seeing watching good leadership or power in action and mirroring that, as well as the importance of the ask and being vocal about where it is that you want to go. Judge Mulligan, what are your thoughts on this area of the cultural constraints and how to step into them?
I love the power of the pause and, let's ask. I mean, I think those two together are really great. I think the issue of structural, racism or structural issues of gender in organizations is really difficult, and no one person is going to solve that. But what I think is really important to gain a voice in any organization that we all participate in is to really build allies and to get to know and understand the people in your workplace or the people in your organization, because the broader your ally group is, the louder your voice is going to be when you have something that you want that you want to say to your group, or when you want to do the ask. The larger your ally group in your organization, the more people are going to listen to what you're asking and listen and maybe take some action on it. So, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I keep going back to, build your friendships and build your relationships. And it's not only because these people can support and be helpful to you. I mean, I think one of the threads that's going through this particular webinar is that you have to be true to yourself and who you are, and you have to be genuine in your outreach, right? I also think it's really important to ask yourself when you are participating, you know, what is it that I want to contribute to this conversation, right? I mean, I think it's sort of, where can I plug a hole? How can I advance the conversation? So it's not just to speak up, but it's also, what can I contribute when I speak up? I think those things are important.
Here we go. I would completely agree with that, Judge Mulligan, and thank you for those comments. I'm going to open this up really to all three of you, because I'm curious if you have examples, just an example of effective leadership or not, that you've observed that might help demonstrate the use of power, either by yourself or by someone else, that that you observed. And what was your takeaway from that, as far as for, you know, in again, learning from others about how to show up, how to lead, that you think would be useful to this discussion? Does anyone want to step into that?
I'll take that one. I mean,
sure.
I think the style of leadership that I have found most effective is a leader who asks other people on the team to do things, because it's not the sort of person. I mean, I don't like the word in charge, but it's not the person who is in charge. It's not their job to do everything, and so by bringing everybody in and making sure everybody has a role and a task and a project, at the end of the day, you get a better product. You bring in, you know, different types of thought. I mean, the leaders that are the best are listening to other people on their team. And that way they get more diversity of thought into the actual output that they're putting out. So I appreciate that leadership style. And I think it also helps build new leaders, because you're challenging the people on your team along the way to take a step and to take responsibility for something. And I think that that's very helpful. One of the things, and then I'll stop, but one of the things all of us that we were talking about as we were preparing for this webinar, is that, you know, at times, I mean, all of us are at least 30 years into our career. So we've been doing this for a while, and we didn't start out like this. We didn't start out in our current positions. We didn't start out with the level of confidence that we may, or in some situations may not have today. But you grow along the way. And I think one thing that's really important for younger lawyers to understand is that this is a process of growth. It's a process of learning. It's a process of taking chances. It's a process. You're not going to you know, reach your sort of maximum potential when you first start out. It's a journey, and people should be patient with that, which I think ties into Elisa's comment of even just about, you know, in the moment, taking a pause. I think it's really important to understand that this is a profession, and it is a journey to sort of in different stages of your career, and people should be accepting of that and sort of kind to themselves about that along the way.
Yeah, that's I love the fact I'm completely in line with you as far as for the leadership aspects of getting everybody's voice into the room, allowing for collaboration and joint discovery and ideas, because that does create the best overall group effort and agility and innovation. And now turning to Tristan, do you have something to add to this discussion of leadership styles?
Well, I think your original question too was, what in your experience is an example of effective leadership that you've seen? And since this is about rainmaking, the idea that came to me was I have two examples of what I thought was effective leadership. And one was when I was younger and when was first starting to generate some business, as probably everyone on the call knows, within law firms, there's sometimes quite a tug of war over originating credit or who gets credit for bringing in a piece of business. And I was new at it. And there was a tug of war over this particular matter. And I thought our managing partner at the time did a very effective job at both listening to what I had to say versus listening to what others had to say and trying to strike the best balance. And in the end, although I wasn't entirely happy with the way it worked out, I respected him going forward, and we maintained a collaborative relationship going forward. And then most recently, what I observed also in the rainmaking business generation context was when another partner withdrew from an opportunity in order to make way for others to have that opportunity. And I think it was Aristotle or Socrates who said that a hero is someone who provides or originates a opportunity for others. And I guarantee you that will pay off for him down the road. That will generate a lot of respect, and people will want to continue to spread it around, spread the love. And I think those were two good examples of effective leadership that I'd love to emulate.
Oh,
All right. Thank you, Tristan. What about you, Elisa? What is an example of effective leadership that you could share with us?
I think good leaders are good listeners. And I think when I've observed leaders who take time to respect those in the room, so to speak, and the room can be an actual room, or it might be in a systemic situation or in a firm or other organization. For me, I always say I am much more about the process than the end result. I feel like if the process has been fair and so forth, even if it doesn't go my way, kind of like what Tristan said, I don't feel as challenged by the outcome, as long as I feel like there was a good process. I also think that, I don't know if this is staying right on course, but I made this note. Everybody on this call, and we've got a beautiful group of about 160 people, which is awesome. Even if you're a brand new lawyer or a law student, you can start today by being an ally for someone else. And if you reach down to, if you're a first year law associate and you know someone in law school who's needs some support, you can start that. And by you doing that, it sort of builds on itself. So you don't have to wait for someone to mentor you, you start. And that just kind of builds an energy. And the more we can do that, the more we can support each other. I think that's really helpful. When I was in law school, I just wanted someone to be nice to me who had taken the bar. And I called this woman up once and I said, I'm really worried about my criminal law exam that's tomorrow. And she kind of just dismissed me and made me feel kind of bad. And I was reaching out to her as a mentor. She was about a 30-year lawyer that I met through something. I would never do that to someone, I mean, if someone reaches out, find 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you can change someone's life. And the other thing I'd say when I'm mentoring young attorneys and students is the next phone call that you get can change your life. The next phone call could be for an appointment to something. It could be for a client. It could be for an opportunity that you don't even see coming. So keep your eyes open, make sure that you take a moment to pause before you say yes, and don't say yes to something that doesn't resonate. I agreed to be on the unauthorized practice of law committee. I didn't want to be on the unauthorized practice of law committee, and you could tell. I would sit in those meetings and I would rather watch paint dry. Nothing against those of you who do that. It just wasn't for me. And that was not good. And I said yes for the wrong reason. So use that discernment that, lawyers are trained to be discerning, and we're trained to be discerning for our clients, but sometimes we need to turn it back on ourselves and be discerning about what we need for ourselves. So that's what I would say. Michele, you're muted.
No, anyway, sorry about that, folks. I am not the best at multitasking. I will definitely admit that. So, you know, we've already really, this concept of allyship and being able to, the importance of developing relationships and support networks has already really come up quite a bit in our discussion. And I want to highlight one item. It's called the tall poppy syndrome. And this is, it comes from this idea of the horticultural, you know, when they're growing the poppies, they're all in this field. And anytime that there would be a flower that would rise up and be taller than all the rest, they would simply lop it off. And so that you have this uniformity of blooms all at a lower level. And in where it comes into use is the fact that it's this idea that people, women, many times in particular, anytime they see someone who's a rising star, who is shining in the moment, they're not supportive. And so it's instead saying, well, she thinks she's all that. You know, she needs to, you know, she's a little too big for her britches. It actually, the tall poppy syndrome, I've experienced it and seen it from both men and women. But I would say that it's really important to be able to appreciate and to support and celebrate other women's achievements. One of the best ways in order to help everybody rise is to allow those who are shining and standing out to celebrate that, so that then others can do the same. And as you have more people shining, it allows for everybody else, sort of the full field of poppies to come up, so to speak. So I'd really encourage that as far as for finding and creating support networks among your peers in order to help celebrate your successes and to be aware of how you're doing that for others. And as far as for men, as you heard from our panelists, they are incredibly important as allies. There are many men who are very supportive of women in leadership in the profession, and they really want to be your ally. They see this and understand it as a win-win. There's no doubt that the way that we make effectual structural change and really increase the speed of change in getting diversity onto different executive boards and in the halls of power and so forth is really through those that already have the power, because they're the ones that open the doors. So in that, I would, I'd like to ask Tristan, again, I know you've already talked a bit about how relationships are central to our success as lawyers and leaders generally, but how have you learned to build your relationships and that in order to enhance your leadership and your career success?
Well, one example is just in terms of developing ideas for a case. I did often think, look, I'm going to be trying to make an argument that is novel, and I need a little humility. I need to consult with someone who will give me honest feedback about what's working, what's not, that sort of thing. And this is where I think practitioners can learn a little bit more from the academy, the legal academy, scholars and judges, you know, retired judges who are off the bench. And I have reached out to various scholars and have involved them in various cases. And those have been some of the best relationships and friendships over time, not only because the intellectual collaboration of really trying to get it right and not just win is itself a fun endeavor, but I think it makes the evolution of law itself better. So that's been one example, which anyone can do, you know, whether you're an associate or a partner. I also think the ABA is probably, you know, the best collaborative organization to get involved in. creating events with clients and others is probably the most fun.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree. I love the ABA as far as for collaborating, and I've had many mentors and excellent role models that I've met through the ABA. Elisa, what would you say as far as for how you've learned to build relationships and enhance your leadership and as well as your professional career?
Well, I'm not sure I have anything significantly different than what's been said, but I did peek at one of the questions, and one of the questions was about how do you address when someone takes your idea, sort of like the cartoon. And it's not. I would not recommend saying that was my idea. That probably wouldn't go that well. But what I've done with some of the women in my firm is, and other allies, is if I have a success, for example, if I get an award, I still get a little cringy about an award, I feel, ooh. But I also, on the other hand, I want it to be known. But I don't want to send an email out to my whole firm, hey, guess what? I got an award. So what I'll do is I'll go up to someone and say, hey, would you mind sending out an email that I got this award, okay? And likewise, if she gets a good verdict with a trial or something, our firm is very much promotional like this, entrepreneurial. I'll say, hey, Tina just got this amazing win. She got, whatever it is. And so we kind of support each other by elevating each other's presence, if you will, and just sort of doing it organically and keeping each other's, especially with the younger women. I like to find out if some of the younger women are having good results with clients, and I push that out so that our leadership, which is mostly male with some exceptions, that they are aware of what amazing things our younger women who may not be as good at self-promoting at this point. I just sort of just do it. And I'm their cheerleader, I guess you would say.
Yeah, that's really good. Self-promotion is important. And I love the idea of having somebody else send it out for you, because that's actually really an astute move. Judge Mulligan, we only have a couple minutes left before the end of the hour. And I was wondering, are there any other thoughts that you'd like to share as far as for the importance of relationship building, or a takeaway on leadership? Perhaps one question I saw, I don't know if you'd be able to address, is just the idea of when do you know when to switch from a collaborative leadership style into a different type of leadership style, or how you would view
I'm
that?
not really sure I can answer that question, because I think, we've talked a lot about being sort of true to who you are. And I think you need to develop your own leadership style. But I have, looking at the questions, there's one I would like to answer. There's one from a lawyer. So I'm just going to divert for a minute. There's one from a lawyer that said, I've been asking for more, for a different type of work, for more leadership roles. And I've been told, just wait, you'll eventually get it. Just wait, you'll eventually get it. So what do I do? And I think this does answer your question about allies in some way, Michele. And that is, if you've been asking and you're not getting it, I think what you need to do is find an ally in your firm that you can talk to and that you can trust, and talk to them, talk to them about this dilemma, that you would like to take on different roles, you would like to get more different work, whatever it is that you want to do to advance, and how would they suggest you do that, and begin to work with that person and talk with that person and meet with that person who has some inside knowledge about how your organization works, who may be able to guide you, because not every organization is the same and they all have their quirks, and that's part of building allies, so that you can figure out what the roadmap is. And then if I can just make one pitch, because I notice we do have quite a number of men on this webinar, and all of us have talked about allyship, and there's a program or a toolkit through the ABA Commission on Women in the Profession called Men in the Mix, how men can be allies to women in women's advancement in the profession. It's a really wonderful toolkit that any legal organization can use to start a conversation about how men and women can be allies in this effort. So I encourage you to take a look at the website and see if it might be helpful to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Judge Mulligan, and the rest of our panelists. We're actually at the top of the hour, and I want to just thank everybody for their participation. Please feel free to reach out. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to everybody's questions, but if you have them and you'd like to continue the conversation, please reach out to us. And it's just been really a lot of fun talking with you and hearing your thoughts and ideas and experiences about owning our power as women and leadership moving forward. So thank you. And Carol?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Michele, Tristan, Judge Mulligan, and Elisa. And to all our listeners today, we sincerely appreciate your interest in the webinar series. Please stay on the webinar to give us your feedback. Please feel free to reach out to me. My email is there if you have any questions, and we hope to see you on September 22nd for our next webinar in the series. And we wish everyone very successful rainmaking for the rest of 2021. Thank you, and here's to your successful rainmaking. Sasha?
That's all the time that we're going to have for today. I'd like to thank Michele, Tristan, Elisa, and Maureen for presenting today. We will now conclude the webinar. Thanks, everyone.